Now, obviously, this would include violence and threats of violence, but I would also include theft. And with theft, I would include fraud. Basically, any situation where I am taking money from somebody while not providing a clear understanding, basically a contract that we both agree to, about what me, the taker, will do for the other person, the giver, in exchange for that money. And of course, misleading them as well would also be fraud. I consider all of this to be immoral. And let me even add one more situation. If I steal from somebody, if I, after I do the theft, create the illusion or the appearance of doing a service for them, that's still theft. Like if I stole your wallet and then went through it and found out where you lived and used the money inside to remodel your kitchen, still theft, right? It's like now theft plus breaking and entering. And if I remodel your kitchen in a way that isn't exactly what you want, it's theft plus breaking and entering plus vandalism. So no magic there by creating a service after the fact, a sort of ex post facto justification for doing the theft. It's not okay. Now many of you are probably saying, Brett, duh. That's pretty much human decency that you're describing there. Well, here's where perhaps the plot thickens a little bit, even though what I'm about to say is incredibly simple and should be obvious to anyone who wants to admit it. When it comes to this principle of non-aggression that I know should be a guiding principle in my life, I also know it should be a guiding principle in the life of every other individual on the planet Earth. We almost can't afford to live in a world where this is not the case. In other words, I think it is absolutely absurd to allow for special rules or some kind of moral relativism for certain people to violate this principle if they have a certain job title or a certain costume, or they sit in a certain office, or they have millions of people encouraging them to violate the principle of non-aggression. That does not make any sense when you think about it. But this isn't just a moral issue. This is a safety issue. Let me offer a more practical reason for why I think that there are no special rules, and there is no moral relativism. Nobody gets a pass to initiate force against other people. Why is it dangerous? Let's say we have two groups of people. Now, one basically follows and believes in this principle of non-aggression. Most of the people that you know are probably like this. Really, almost all of them. And then there's another group of people that for some magical reason gets a pass, and they do not have to adhere to the principle of non-aggression. They can willingly initiate force on other people for whatever reasons they deem necessary. Now, even if the group that is excused for whatever unknown reason from following the principle of non-aggression, even if that group is just a teeny tiny fraction of the group of people who feel that it's in their interest to not be violent, even if the aggressive group is just a little tiny fraction of the bigger group, what's going to happen over time, and maybe it would take a day, maybe it would take a couple of weeks, maybe it would even take a few years, even though that's doubtful. What will develop, I believe very quickly, and I think history will back me up, is a major power disparity between the group that adheres to the principle of non-aggression and the group of people who, for whatever reason, feel like it's okay to violate it whenever they deem necessary. Imagine how much more powerful the group that can just initiate force would be, really at the expense of the other group. Another thing that history will demonstrate pretty consistently is that power is not a good thing. A lot of people fail to recognize this, but most people, when they attain power, the reaction is similar to what it is for some people with booze. It clouds their judgment, and they just want more and more of it at all costs. And they'll usually start to craft some pretty bizarre and desperate rationalizations for why they need more power over people. They'll tell the people that they're already exercising power over that they want to give them more freedom or serve them better. Just give us more power. It's such a bizarre and destructive illness, this power. So, just to sum up that business plan that I was talking about, hopefully you found some problems with it. Here are the problems that I see. Number one, it is immoral. It is immoral for me to initiate force against other people, even if I claim that I need to do this in order to provide them a service. I think we just illustrated how friggin' berserk that line of thinking is. Even if I have a bulletproof, brilliant plan that I know would be so good for millions and millions of people, I have absolutely no right to force my will on anybody. See, the good thing about a really brilliant plan or a really super quality service is that people will seek it voluntarily. It doesn't have to be imposed on them. And that brings us to the second problem, the issue of incentives. If I'm forcing people to pay for my service, I totally lack incentives to ensure that the service has any quality. See, in business, if a business wants to stay in business, they have to be responsive to signals that the marketplace sends, right? If the marketplace tells me that my product is too expensive or the quality isn't good enough, I have to adapt. I have to make a change. I have to make the product better or cheaper or more competitive or include more features. I mean, the number of signals that the market can send, there's a lot of them. But if I'm forcibly extracting money from my quote-unquote customers, I don't get market signals because the money comes in either way. And if I can use force, I can always make sure that it's more and more money. And what will probably happen over time is that as the cost goes up, the quality, strangely enough, will actually go down. Third problem is one of power. At the outset, I said that I was envisioning a business plan that had no obstacles, right? So basically what I have is a monopoly over the use of force in the perfect vision of the obstacle or impediment-free business plan. Nobody can stop me from initiating force against other people. And it also helps that I'm in charge of education, right? So I can shape people's perception of me. Like, over time, maybe it would take a few years, maybe it would take a couple generations. I, the violent aggressor, could make myself appear to be the good guy. And when people try to defend themselves against me, they're the ones, like I said before, they're the ones who are doing something wrong. So the longer this goes on, and the more people are just trained to consent, my violence would actually just become invisible. Isn't that scary? And you know, if I packaged the propaganda in the right way through the curriculum of whatever kind of education I was trying to deliver, I could really probably even convince people that they were participating in all this voluntarily. Because all the incentives are there for them to believe that. Like, people don't want to believe that they're slaves or victims or that they're being aggressed against or that they have no control over what's happening with a certain portion of their money. So they would want to participate in that illusion of a voluntary relationship between me, the violent education service provider, and them, the victim. And I could use that to set up all kinds of other services, quote unquote, which I could also fund through this coercion, which to most people was invisible, and not have to return anything to them of any quality. Now, if these three problems with this business plan that I just pointed out are not enough, there's one more. You see, a good business plan should also be original. And what I've been describing to you for the last 20 minutes or so is far from a new idea. This is how the government in the United States has run the service of education for a century. And you know, I think it's also worth pointing out that throughout this entire presentation, I've been using two misnomers repeatedly. The first is the word business.